All right, guys, welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast. This week I'm excited. I've got Jared Wegner, a Arkansas Razorback baseball player, was named preseason All-American. He's new to the Razorback squad. As a Razorback fan, I'm always excited to have any kind of Razorback I can get on. But Jared I'm excited to have on because Jared is a new bow hunter. And I love being able to talk to new bow hunters about what they've learned, where they have found success, where they have found failures. That way, hopefully, you as a new hunter can learn from them and their mistakes. Jared did actually find success this past season in Oklahoma and shot his first buck. And so we're going to kind of dive into that, what he learned, his takeaways from those. But guys, I promise you that if you're a new hunter and you're just getting started, I promise you there will be something to take away from Jared's journey into this. But also, if you're a advanced hunter, I would highly encourage you to listen because Jared gives some great insight on the barriers that new hunters go through. So if you understand those barriers that a new hunter goes through, then you can better help them get over those barriers. So guys, no matter where you're at in your bow hunting journey, this will be a good episode for you. As always, this episode is presented by our good friends over at ScentLock. A lot of people make great clothing. I'm not saying that. But for whitetail hunting specifically, what really sets ScentLock apart is their carbon technology for maximum odor absorption. They have in the BE1 series, they have a full toolkit for bow hunters. It's called the Bowhunter Elite Series. From the gloves down to the belts, pants, everything is built and made for bow hunters. If you have not checked out ScentLock, I would highly, highly encourage you to do so. But guys, thanks for tuning in. This is going to be a fun episode.
Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, where hunters new and old come to learn and find inspiration from stories of hunts gone by. Everyone is welcome to enjoy the outdoor way of life, and there is no better time to start than right now. So let's head into the great outdoors with your host, Dylan Ray.
Guys, I oftentimes say that I always have a binocular harness on my chest. What good is a binocular harness without a good set of binoculars? I am a sucker for fine Japanese glass. I love good optics. I love spending time behind it. It's just fun. It's fun to go out and look at stuff, but also good optics make spotting and looking through them a whole lot more enjoyable. Kowa Optics does it and does it better than anyone else, in my opinion. They have some of the finest Japanese glass on planet Earth. It's all I've used for the past, 8 years or so. This right here, the Kowa 55, is one of the best products ever made in the history of the universe. It is the smallest, most compact scope you can get, but it still offers phenomenal glass. It's really hard to find a spotter that is this small, this light, this compact. You can throw it in your backpack. You can leave it in your truck. It's so small and so compact, but it still offers phenomenal glass. This is one of my favorite products ever. Guys, if you're in the market for new optics, I would highly encourage you to check out Kowa Optics because they are, in my opinion, the best glass that you can buy. Go check them out. All right, we got Jared Wegner, a Razorback. Anytime I get a Razorback on the phone, it's a good day. I was born and raised Northwest Arkansas and diehard Razorback fan. So anytime I get a chance to talk to a Razorback, it's fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show. I'm blessed to do this podcast. So,
and you're new to the Razorback squad, and I'll tell you kind of what happened was, I see the Arkansas baseball page, and they commented and they posted, hey, preseason All-American, Jared Wegner. And so I go to your page just to do my homework as a Razorback fan, and I'm like, oh, dude's a hunter. That's good. And then I'm like, oh, wow, he's a bow hunter. So now we know he's a good baseball player too, because bow hunters excel in everything. No. And so I reached out to you, and you're like, well, man, hey, I'm just getting started. And I was like, that's good. That's not a bad thing. This podcast is geared towards teaching and inspiring new hunters and old hunters alike. And so, I actually get that comment a lot of like, hey, Dylan, why don't you have new hunters on just to talk about, their experience and what they're learning and what they're experiencing and how things are going for them and, what they can do differently or what they, need to to learn, or so on and so forth. And so I'm actually really excited to have you on and to talk about your journey into bow hunting.
Yeah. So I'd say my journey started with one of my roommates at the time while I was playing at Creighton. He was bow hunting. I was interested in it. I'd grown up waterfowl hunting basically my entire life, and ended up going to the bow shop, did some research online, had never shot a bow in my entire life. Walked into a shop, completely terrified, didn't want to feel like an idiot. Walked in, said, I walked in, said, never shot a bow. Let me try some out. At that time I was looking for kind of a mid-range bow, something to get started with. And, the people at the shop helped me out, and didn't feel like an idiot. Thought I was going to make myself look stupid, and walked out of the shop with a bow. And ever since then, it's kind of been a real big passion of mine.
So that's in my opinion, and I worked at a bow shop through college. That's how I worked my way through college. And you find, a lot of guys that is the reason they don't get into it. That's the barrier. They don't want to feel like an idiot. They're afraid of walking in and showing their cards of like, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I want to get started. And so that's like the biggest barrier of entry, of just like being able to admit like, hey guys, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I want to get started. And so I would just encourage everybody, like, you have to start somewhere. Don't be ashamed of that. Like, don't be ashamed to walk in and say, I don't know what I'm doing. But I would also, I'm also a big proponent, 30 years ago, they didn't have the resources online. They didn't have the ability to learn online. They didn't have YouTube. They didn't have podcasts. They didn't have good information to learn from. And so it was all just, trial and error. And you hear some of the best shooters in the world today, who are older, and like, we had no idea what we were doing. Like, we just tried to figure something out, and hopefully it worked. And, my personal recurve coach, his name's Tom Klum. He's out of Denver there. And that's, he preaches that. He's like, guys, like we had to struggle through learning everything. But you guys have and you guys meaning the generation that's starting now, have such an advantage because there's so much information on Google and YouTube and podcast, and good information too. It's not just garbage information. So I would say, A, don't be afraid to walk into a shop and just say, no idea what I'm doing. But also, the internet has some crazy good information that you can dive into and start learning from.
Oh yeah, 100%. And that's I use YouTube a lot when I first got my bow and trying to do certain things. I also made some mistakes along the way, some stupid mistakes looking back on it now. And
that'll continue.
What's that?
And that'll continue. You'll keep making mistakes.
Yep. And you just got to learn from those mistakes. At one point I was trying to figure out why my arrow wasn't shooting straight, and I was doing this in my hometown by myself on YouTube videos, and I was going to check the string stop on the cams, and I saw someone had a pull down system where it was, they had a ring on top and they could pull it down, see if they were hitting at the same time. And for whatever reason, I thought, this would be a good idea. I just put it on the edge of my bed and held it and pulled it back. And the string obviously came off the cams because I didn't pull it straight back. And, that sounds so stupid. And it truly was super stupid. But, I live and learn, and I'll never do that again. So had to get new strings and stuff. But that's the things I'm talking about when it comes down to it. It's, you fail and you do something stupid. Well, you're never going to do that again, and you live and learn from it. So.
Yeah. And, I'm a huge proponent, and I tell everybody, and last episode was the first time we kind of shared the new pillars, or the new mission or goal of this podcast. Or I should say the core values of this podcast, and that's to hunt, learn, and share. And I'm going to tell you this as a new hunter, and I'm going to tell anybody who is a new hunter or an advanced hunter. Your job is to start sharing. No matter what point in which you're at your journey, your job is to share. Trust me, dude, there's times where I feel like I have nothing of value to share with somebody. But, I forget sometimes that, there's guys, I've been bow hunting now for, oh crap, 13 years. And so I forget, like, there's guys who are just a year in, and, they don't know how to tune a bow. They don't know how to correctly spine an arrow or how to, do all these things. And there's somebody who needs what I have. And so even for yourself, I mean, you're only 2 years in now, but there's somebody who's only a year in. There's somebody who's only 4 months in, and they need what you have to offer. They need just somebody to say, hey, this is where I started. This is what I did. This is how I did it. These are the lessons that I learned right off the bat. Let me just save you some heartache. Don't draw your bow on your bed. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yep. And especially, I mean, trying to get. So for me, my roommate was the one. He actually went with me. So I think he had 4 or 5 years of experience, but he was the one that went with me to the bow shop, and he was the one that got me to go. So talking about somebody who has some years of experience, doesn't matter how much, but just getting me to go do that and being there with me when I went, that was huge for me to kind of get over that mental hump of, I don't want to look like an idiot. So.
And to me, I applaud that guy, because a lot of guys buy into that idea of like, well, I've only been doing this for 4 years. I've only shot a doe. I haven't even shot a buck yet. How I can't teach somebody. I can't inspire anybody. But that is the furthest thing from the truth, because no matter where you're at in bow hunting, you have something that you can teach somebody else. And that's what I think every hunter needs to learn. And not buy into the thing that, well, I have to be advanced, or I have to be elite, or I have to learn everything I can before I can start teaching somebody. That's the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah, 100%. And another thing is just being open-minded to other people. Some people, I don't know, they've been hunting for a while, and sometimes they'll close off to different suggestions or whatever because they got it figured out. I think bow hunting's pretty similar with a lot of things in life, where you got to keep learning. You got to learn the new techniques,
gosh, yes.
or whatever. So.
Oh my gosh, yes, and that's why that word "learn" is in there. As far as this podcast goes, because no hunter will ever be to the point where they say, "Okay, I'm good. Like, I got it. I'm done." Because no matter what, like, I tell people like this. Like, I've been whitetail hunting with a bow for 13 years. But when I go on an elk hunt, I learn something about bow hunting that I've never experienced before. When I go on a bear hunt, I learn something about bow hunting that I've never learned before. When I go on a hog hunt, when I go on a javelina hunt, or even different locations. Like, dude, I remember when I first started hunting in Texas, like, it's like a culture shock, but you learn so much that you never have experienced before, here in Kansas. It's just completely different. Or in Arkansas, that's where I cut my teeth. That's where I learned everything. That's where that's where I dove in, and I still love hunting Northwest Arkansas. I try to shoot a deer there every year, but, when you go to a different place, you learn something entirely new because the deer act different. They live in different terrain. So you're absolutely right, man. We never have the ability to say, okay, I'm good. Like, I've learned everything. I'm done. You know what I mean? We always have to continue to learn.
Oh yeah, 100%. And like I said, so I hunted in Nebraska. That's where I'm from, so that's where I kind of got started. And it's interesting coming down here. So you're not allowed to bait in Nebraska, where you can bait here in Arkansas and Oklahoma, where I did end up shooting that buck. And a lot of my friends gave me crap because of the baiting, but it's totally, I was so close-minded on it, and like, this isn't fair. Well, no deer is going to, walk up. You still have to have the right wind. You still have to do all the right things for that for that to come together. So, I think it's interesting hunting a different terrain, different rules. Oklahoma is real hilly. Where I'm hunting, it's completely flat. So, you got to check your thermals and be very conscious about that. So, just continue to learn. I have dreams of hunting different animals and different places, and like you said, it kind of fires me up. You're still learning. You've been doing it forever, so fires me up.
So what is that? What's that dream animal? Like if you could go on one hunt today, money's no issue. What are you hunting?
I'm hunting a moose in Alaska.
Really?
I
Yeah.
think so. Yeah, that's the dream
That's it
hunt
for a
right
lot of
there.
people, man. I don't know
Yeah,
why.
I was
Go ahead.
yeah. So I was at the range, actually in Omaha, and was talking to a guy, and he was showing me he had filmed a couple hunts, and ever since then I've kind of been on YouTube looking up different um, people who have filmed their hunts up there, and it just looks awesome. The terrain's sweet. You got to fight the weather and all sorts of things. So it's seems like a pretty cool adventure.
Moose are just crazy. Like they're crazy animals, dude. Nobody understands. Even seeing them in movies, and even seeing them like full body mounts, like in a Cabela's or something, it doesn't do it justice, man. But I remember one time me and my wife, it was the first hunt I ever took her on. The first, I should say, like bigger hunt I ever took her on, and we were chasing bears, and we started seeing moose, and she was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, and close, like I'm not talking like miles away. I'm talking like 40 yards, and she was like, "That's a giant." And she, at one point, she had went out with the outfitter. I had went on a hunt, and it was going to be more of a little bit of a spot and stalk, brutal type hunt. And so I was like, "Why don't you stay at the cabin for the day?" And so she comes with the outfitter to pick me up, and she's like, "We saw a giant moose," and I'm like, "Yeah, they're all giant." Like, and she's like, "No, Dylan, this was big," and I'm like, "Okay." Like, it's one of those deals where like when you've never seen them and all you've seen is deer, like you're gonna think any moose is big. And then she shows me a video, and I'm like, God! I mean, it was like a 72-inch moose, and I'm like, good Lord, just a stud moose. And so, but it's just something that nobody understands, just like how crazy big and magnificent they are until you see them in the wild.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I've never seen one in the wild, so I don't know. I mean, I'm sure
But you will,
they look massive on TV, so I'm sure
you
they're
will
even
though.
bigger in person. And having them within bow range would be a dream of mine. So
I don't know why. I guess I'm just wired a little different. But like everybody that you hear about dream hunts, it's like it's elk or moose or caribou, and I'm like, I just want a giant brown bear. Like that's my number one. Like if money was no object, no issue, and for a lot of guys, you ask that question, like they think of the most expensive hunts, so they're like moose or stone sheep or something like that, and I'm like, dude, I just want to hunt a giant coastal brown bear in Alaska. Now, sure, that's still a crazy expensive, $25,000 hunt, but that would definitely be it for me, like a big old giant coastal brown bear.
yeah, I've never obviously I've only hunted whitetail, and I think it'd be sweet to go out, and especially where I'm from, Colorado is not too far from Nebraska.
Yeah,
So I think it'd be cool to get out there and hunt some elk. It's challenging. I know I got a buddy that lives up there and said that it's just pressured as it can be unless you get
yeah.
certain draws. But yeah, that would be up there too with one of mine. What's your favorite hunt that you've been on? What have
Oh
you enjoyed
Lord,
the
have
most, would you
mercy.
say?
Favorite, like best as far as trophy or best as far as hunt experience?
Hunt experience.
Hunt experience would probably be um a bear hunt in Idaho that I went on. It was actually an elk hunt turned bear hunt. We get there and the elk were just locked up, man. There were fires everywhere. Um, and we were safe. The elk were safe. Like all the fires were across water. So no fear of being trapped in camp or having to evacuate or anything. But the elk don't know that. Like all they know is, man, when we smell this, we usually die. Or we have to, anyways. And so the elk just locked up, and we get there, should have been prime rut, elk should have been just firing off everywhere. And we heard a couple faint bugles at night, but the only time we would hear bugles is when at night, when the wind would switch and the smoke would blow out. And so the elk would, start moving at night. And so that was the only time the elk would move and we would hear them is at night, because, the smoke would start blowing out and they would start moving. And so, but then you'd wake up the next morning, you'd be like, all right, we heard the bugle over here. And you would go and, you couldn't see 100 yards because the smoke would come back in, and, it was just a really hard hunt. And so it turned bear hunt pretty quick. But still getting to chase bears in the mountains of Idaho was just an absolute crazy thing. I had my recurve with me, and just a crazy. I actually shot a bear with my recurve, but I hit him a bit high and just never found him. So that's why I said favorite trophy or favorite experience, because that was like my favorite experience, even though I shot at an animal, but I never got that animal. And so definitely a fun experience. Best trophy would be my first deer with a recurve. That was my favorite trophy thus far. If people ask me what's the highlight of your hunting, it would be killing my first deer with a recurve, for sure.
Yeah, I can't imagine how hard, hunting with a recurve is. I see people at the range doing it all the time. Looks really challenging. Something I might get into if, I continue down this bow hunting adventure that I'm planning on going down. So tell me a little bit about, how to get into recurve hunting and what it takes, because it looks interesting. It looks sweet,
So I would say, as a baseball player, you have a very big advantage. Here's why. Because baseball is a very technical sport. Technique is everything in baseball, and I'm not a baseball player, never was. But I have friends who are, and baseball is very technical. Everything from the way you pitch to the way you catcher and hitting, it's all a technical sport. Shooting a recurve is very technical. It takes crazy amounts of technique. Gone are the days of pulling back and letting an arrow fly. That's how they used to do it. And that's how, talking with Tom Clum, he's like, man, we didn't have technique. Like, we didn't know, how muscle groups functioned and how holding weight functioned. And, we just drew back and we learned how to let an arrow fly. But now we've learned so much about technique that we can dial that in. And so shooting a recurve is very technical, but as a baseball player, you obviously have good instincts. And traditional archery, if you can instinctively shoot, you can be very good at it. In other words, you don't have pins, to aim. So I do what's called point-on shooting because I'm not a good instinctive shooter. So in other words, I use the tip of my arrow to aim, basically as a single pin sight. So at 20 yards, I hold, 7.5 inches under where I want to hit. But guys who can instinctively shoot a recurve, I admire those guys because they don't have to check distance. They don't have to, when you throw a baseball, it's not like, okay, he's 33 yards away. He's slightly downhill. So I need to, no, you just throw the ball. Like, you just see the person and throw it. And that's how instinctive shooting a recurve goes. Now, I do want to make, and this isn't to you, but this is to kind of everybody. Instinctive shooters get a bad rap as pull back and let her fly. You can have very good technique and execute a perfect shot and still shoot instinctively. So just because somebody says, oh, I'm an instinctive shooter, doesn't mean that they don't practice good back tension and they don't practice a good shot execution. You can have perfect shot execution, perfect form, perfect technique, and still shoot instinctively. So I would encourage you to give it a shot, man, because believe it or not, you're pretty well built for it because you obviously, again, have good instincts and that's something you can learn and that's something you can do. So I would give it a try, man, for sure.
Yeah, that sounds like maybe here in the future I might be buying a recurve. So
yeah,
no, that's all good
I
stuff.
I actually have a series. I don't know what episode numbers it's through, but I'd have to go back and look. But If you scroll back, we did a traditional 101 series, and we had some of the most accomplished recurve hunters in the world on. We had Tom Klum, Aaron Schneider, Fred Eichler. We had all these guys on to teach you from the ground up how to shoot a recurve, how to select a bow, how to set up that bow, how to tune that bow, shot execution, form, aiming methods, everything. So if anybody out there is looking to get into shooting a recurve, I would highly encourage you to jump back and find that traditional 101 series that we did and take a deep dive into that, because it was, I learned, and that was right when I was getting into it. So it was super beneficial for me. And, I've heard from a lot of guys that helped me get into it. So I would definitely give it a listen. But Jared, I'm excited to kind of dive into this. Guys, there's one fabric that if you're not wearing, you absolutely should be. It's a magic fabric. It changes everything about the way you layer, everything about the way you dress, everything about the way you hunt, and that is merino wool. I couldn't even begin to tell you all of the benefits of merino wool, and I'm going to miss some for sure. But guys, whether it's summer or whether it's winter, this is going to keep you cool in the summer. It's moisture wicking. It's going to pull the moisture away from your body, but it's also going to hold your heat in the winter. It is antimicrobial. It doesn't smell. It doesn't hold scent like other fabrics does. So if you're out on a 5-day hunt, you don't have access to a washer, this is not going to hold your scent. It's not going to get stinky and nasty. It's also quick drying. You can hang this up in your tent. You can hang it up on a clothesline. It's going to dry really quick. But the coolest part about merino, in my opinion, is that when it gets wet, it still maintains its warmth properties. So if there's a light rain or a snow and this gets wet, it's still going to keep me warm. There's no itch. It's non-allergenic. It's an amazing fabric. Minus 33. I stumbled upon minus 33 by accident. I was on backcountry.com and they were having a blowout sale. I needed some new merino for a hunt that was coming up. And so I dove in. I bought it. And when I got it, it was the softest, best merino I have ever felt in my entire life. I've not worn anything but minus 33 socks for everyday life, whether I'm hunting, hiking, or just, out for the day. I haven't worn anything but minus 33 socks in over a year and a half. Every single day I'm wearing their underwear. Every single time I'm out hunting, whether it's 100 or whether it's 5, I'm wearing some sort of beanie to cover up my chrome dome and to keep that covered up and warm or cool, if it's in the summer. But also that UV protectant. I like to wear it in the summer. Guys, minus 33 does merino, in my opinion, better than anybody else does it. Go check out minus 33 for all your merino wool. And if you haven't ever tried merino, guys, you are missing out. It will change the way you layer. It will change the way you hunt. Go check out merino wool and go check out minus 33. So you started bow hunting 2 years ago. What was the biggest obstacles other than, just taking that step and saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. What were your biggest obstacles in getting into bow hunting?
Well, I think I would probably say the biggest obstacles was that I had never hunted deer before. And
really? So there was no jump from rifle hunt to bow hunt?
Never rifle hunted in my life.
Okay.
So honestly, I think that was one of the biggest challenges for me, was that I had no experience of how deer moved, how, I had to learn what a scrape was, as silly as that sounds. I had to learn it all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that was probably the biggest challenges, trying to decide where, how to set up, different techniques, what to look for when scouting a place. Luckily, I have some riverland in Nebraska that I have the opportunity to hunt on, and that's been a blessing. I haven't had the time we should be putting in food sources and stuff, but I've been so busy here with baseball. I always say I picked a really tough time to get into bow hunting, just because of how busy I am with trying to be a student athlete at the same time. But anyway, so I'd say that would be one of the biggest challenges, with just learning everything that I possibly can. And I remember, traveling to games, stuff like that. I would be listening to podcasts, learning as much as I can, watching YouTube videos, just trying to understand hunting. how deer move, how deer work, stuff like that. So that was one of the biggest challenges, just getting into hunting. But getting into bow hunting, I'd say the biggest challenge was getting over basically, that it's going to be really, really rough every day when you first begin.
Yeah.
You know,
It's going to suck. That doesn't
it
stop.
sucked. And it was, it's kind of embarrassing. You go to the range and you see guys shooting, 7, 8 inch groups at 60, and you're shooting 12-inch groups at 30, and you're like, well,
Yeah.
this is, this sucks, but it's part of it. And I'm one of those guys that if I'm going to do something, I'm going to go all in on it. And it was very good deal for me when it came to shooting my bow, because I go shoot every day, and it takes a lot of practice. I got a pretty good shot, and I say that that's to my hard work, and I've gotten pretty confident in my ability to shoot.
That's good, man. And that's what I kind of wanted to hit on a little bit was, you hear a lot of people say, well, I don't have time. It drives me bonkers when I hear my wife, like, we're getting ready for season. She's like, I don't have time to practice. I'm like, get off your phone for an hour. Like, I mean, you don't have time to practice. But that's like my biggest drawback was when people say, I want to start bow hunting, but I don't have time to practice. And I'm like, well, you do. Like, you just have to make time. And that's what, like, when you hear student athlete, like, a lot of people are like, well, he's in college, he can do whatever he wants. Sure, he doesn't have kids, he doesn't have a job, he doesn't have. As a student athlete, those are about the busiest people I know. Like, talking to student athletes and being an athlete in college is a full-time job. And then you've got college on top of that. You've got and another obstacle that I think you represent well is the lack of area to practice at. A lot of guys say, well, I want to get into it, but I live in the middle of LA. Like, I don't have anywhere to practice. I don't have anywhere to shoot. Well, there's not many places as confined as a college campus. I mean, you can't just go out in the hallway of your dorm and start shooting. That's how you get arrested. But I remember in college, man, like, I would drive and just find woods and just set up. And sure, I probably wasn't allowed to be in there, but I would just find woods. Like, it might be in the middle. I went to college in Oklahoma City. And so it might be in the middle of the city, just a little patch of woods, but I could shoot 40 yards. And that was where I would go practice. And so the two biggest things that I think people complain about not having when they want to get into this is time and access to shoot. And to those people, you just have to say, guys, there will always be excuses. Like, there will always be things that can hold you back if you let them hold you back. But if you want to do this, you have to prioritize your time. Like, you have to make time. You have to make opportunities for yourself. And I get it. Like, a lot of guys look at me and they're like, well, yeah, you get to shoot every day, all day, because you make your living in hunting. And I'm like, I mean, I still have a job. Like, it's not, even though I work in the outdoor industry, I still have a job I have to do. But man, I set up a range in my backyard. I've got 13 3D targets in my backyard. So I can walk on my back deck and be shooting at 60 yards at a 3D deer. And people are like, yeah. And then you get the whole, yeah, so you have access right outside your back door. And I'm like, yeah, but I have 3 kids. And I set it up that way to where the kids can be jumping on the trampoline back here and I can be shooting. That way, if I have the kids, I can still go out and shoot. And so you just have to create opportunities for yourself. You have to prioritize it. If you want to do it, it's something you have to prioritize. And that's true for anything. I mean, if you want to lose weight, you got to prioritize going to the gym. If you want to play baseball, you got to prioritize practice. I mean, if you want to, be a good artist, you have to prioritize time to practice art. I mean, you have to, so you just have to make time. I mean, it's never going to be just a golden ticket. Okay, now I can do it. No problems. I mean, that's always going to be the case. So you've got to just prioritize it.
Yeah. And, if it's important to you, I think you're going to end up doing it. Like you said, you set up those targets in your backyard because it's important to you. And so for example, when I was in Omaha, so I went to school at Creighton before I transferred here, and Creighton's in the middle of downtown Omaha. So, you know, I would drive
But now you play. But
25.
now you play for the Omahags.
That's right. I do play for the Omahags. So, but going back to the story. So in Omaha, I'm in the middle of downtown Omaha, and I live in an apartment, and I would drive 25 minutes to the range that was north of Omaha. 25 minutes, and shoot arrows, especially in the fall leading up to my breaks, because our program at Creighton, we were busy every Saturday. Home was 2.5 hours away. I think I made the trip twice just to hunt Saturday night and Sunday morning. But leading up to the season and fall break, winter break, I was shooting all the time as much as I could. I'd go shoot, sneak away, 25 minutes, shoot 50 arrows before the sunset. So it was important to me, especially, being my first. At that time, I hadn't shot anything. I was looking to shoot a doe or a buck, obviously, and it was important to me. I wanted to make a good shot, and I wanted to feel confident when I pull that string back. I want to know that I'm going to make a good shot, execute a good shot. So that was important to me, and I didn't make any excuses. It's easy to make excuses, but it's making excuses. It's easy, but missing a deer or making a bad shot on a deer, that's tough. And so you want to be as prepared as you can. Obviously, sometimes that's out of your control. People do make bad shots. All the best guys have made bad shots. So, but you just want to feel confident. That's the thing. So.
Yeah, that is something, no matter what, that is something that's going to happen. You will make a bad shot. You will wound an animal. It sucks every time you do it. Like, that doesn't get easier. And if it doesn't suck, like if that doesn't affect you at all, you probably shouldn't be bow hunting. Like, I don't want you chasing animals. If hitting an animal and not finding it doesn't affect you, I don't want you hunting. Like, I don't want you chasing deer, because obviously there's a disconnect there, because our job as sportsmen is to make an ethical shot every single time. And so if it doesn't suck, like, you're probably not doing it for the right reasons. But that also, speaking to women here for a second, the number one reason that women who want to hunt don't get into it is because the fear of hitting an animal and wounding it and not finding it. That's the number one reason for women not to get into the sport.
Huh, that's interesting. I've never heard that.
It's absolute. I mean, it's going to happen. Like, there's nothing, you can't get around that. But what you can do is exactly what Jared said. Practice to the point where you're so confident that you can make the shot. Don't go out there if you don't know that you can make the shot. And the biggest lesson that I've ever learned in hunting is there is no cut and dry, this is my maximum distance. Like, that's my biggest pet peeve, is when somebody says, well, what's your maximum distance? What's the furthest you'll shoot an animal? And I'm like, man, just depends. Like, if I see a deer or a bear, an elk, or whatever it might be, if I see that animal and I know in my heart that I can shoot that animal and kill it, then I'm going to shoot it. So there's times where, like last year, I let one rip at 40. I had a buck at 40 yards and I shot it and killed it. And there were times that I had a buck at 13 yards, and just the way everything was working, I didn't feel comfortable making the shot. Be it a small window through the trees and super windy, and the buck was weary. And, even though he's at 13 yards, I'm like, man, there's a lot that can go wrong here. So I'm not going to shoot. So effective distance is very, very dependent on the atmosphere you're in. I mean, it's going to change all of the time. So, but that is exactly what a new hunter needs to focus on: learning their equipment, practicing so much that when they go out, they know for a fact, I'm confident in my setup, I'm confident in my equipment, I'm confident in my abilities, and I can make this shot and I can kill the deer when the time comes to kill the deer.
Yep. And, for me, it was getting out as much as I can, learning as much as I can. I don't know. I still go back to confidence. Just if you're not confident in your gear or your shot, then you shouldn't be hunting, because you're gonna make, obviously you're gonna make some bad shots, and people do. But if you're not confident out there and you haven't put the work in, then for me, I don't know if you really should be out there unless you're confident in what you're doing.
Yeah, dude, 100%. So on the deer hunting side of things, which I will make note too, just last year during deer season, we did a deer 101 series, had some of the most accomplished deer hunters on ever. And again, we talk about from the ground up how to learn deer, tactics to hunt them, how to scout, how to hang tree stands, where to hang tree stands. We had the hunting public on, and we had raised hunting, and we had Philip Vanderpool, just a lot of big buck killers to teach us how to deer hunt. So I would highly encourage you to dive into that too. But on the deer side of things, what was the biggest thing that you had to learn about deer in order to be successful?
Oh, I would say that, I think over pressuring a spot. So my Riverland, it's got, I think we got 40 acres, and me and my friend were hunting it. And when we first got into it, we were both hunting it, and we overdid it. We were hunting it too much pressure. We started seeing less bucks on trail cam. We started seeing less deer movement. And that was kind of something that I learned from a podcast and kind of thought about it, because we were hitting it hard there for a week, when I was back for fall break. And it was like, the first couple of days we saw deer, and then, by the end of it, we weren't seeing anything at all. And that was something that was kind of interesting to me, is picking the right days to go and not just going out there, and over pressuring an area. So for me, that was one of the things that I learned, that, it seemed like, okay, well, I should go hunting, go as much as I can. And, we don't have we have like a north access, got to walk through areas. It's just not a clean access route. So, on certain days you got to say, well, maybe it's better that I don't go out there, I guess. So for me, that was one thing, and that I learned.
That still is like the hardest lesson for me to learn. I've got a couple buddies, and they made me mad for so many years, because I'm like, dude, I spent 35 days in the field. You go out 2 days and you kill a booner. Like, this makes me mad. And they're like, yeah, because we wait for the perfect day. Like, we wait till, that 2 days, we've got a cold snap. It's the middle of the rut. Barometric pressure's through the roof. So moon phase is good. I mean, everything. And so we go out with the highest chance of killing deer. And so what I learned was, you're absolutely right, dude. You go out for 35 days, and they're bad days to hunt. You've got a wrong wind. It's too hot. The barometric pressure is way low. It's, you don't have a great chance of killing deer. So going out there, all you're doing is teaching those deer what you are. All you're doing is letting those deer know where you are, where you're sitting. People who call all the time, all you're doing is teaching those deer, the sounds you're making, and, all of those things. And if you run a decoy for, 12 days, all you're doing is teaching, man, that same buck has been in that same spot for 12 days straight. And 2 nights ago, homeboy rolled in there and he got shot at. Like, so I'm not going in there. So all you're doing is educating those deer as to what not to do. And so that's still, for me, is because I just want to be out there hunting. So here's what I have learned, and here's what I do. Say I've got 10 leases, which right now, I've got 7 leases, 2 of which are like my prime go-to. I've got big bucks on them. That's where I want to hunt. I go to the other 5 on bad days, and I go to bad spots on those bad 5 on bad days. To where I might see some does, I might see some coyotes. I can just enjoy being out there, and I'm not going to spook and mess up my prime 2 spots that when weather gets great, that's where I want to be. And so that's what I encourage everybody to do. Like, absolutely, dude. If season's open and you have the chance to be out there, get out there. But don't mess up, your A+ tree stand on those bad days. Hold out on your A+ tree stand for that perfect day. Um, you know, and there's even been times where like, man, it's a bad day, but I really want to be at A+. So what I'll do is I'll go out to the A+ spot, but I'll pull 400 yards out, 500 yards out, sit on an elevated little hill or a hay bale. Here in Kansas, we don't have elevation, so you might have to climb on a hay bale and just sit with a spotting scope, just to start patterning the deer on your A+ spot. But that's what I've learned, man, is if it's season, I want to be out there, but don't mess up your A+ tree stands because you just want to be out in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's super challenging because I want to go out and I learned early on. I heard you can't shoot a deer from the couch, and maybe that advice it's true, but it's not, because you go out there and you wear a spot out, and there's not a great chance that you're gonna connect with a deer. So that was kind of an interesting. I've always heard both, and I believe in what you're saying. What would you say for somebody? I back in Nebraska, I have one spot, and that's the challenging thing, is I only have one spot where I can go and kind of get that fix. Being out in the wilderness and in the woods. So, what would you say for that? You just gotta be patient, I feel like.
Well, and that's true for a lot of guys. A lot of guys don't have the benefit of having multiple farms, multiple places, even multiple states. Because what I do, like, if Kansas just looks bad, I drive to Oklahoma, and if Oklahoma looks bad, I go to Missouri. If Missouri looks bad, I go to Arkansas. If Arkansas looks bad, I'll go to Texas. You know what I mean? So a lot of guys don't have that ability, and I didn't for the longest time. And so it goes back again to what I said before. Pull way out, or have that prime spot of, okay, this is where shooter A is. Like, this is where I've been nailing him down. So I don't want to go in there until I know conditions are right. So pull way out and then just watch from a distance. One time I actually thought I was going in to just watch from a distance. I was going up to set and just wait. And it was the middle of the rut, but I had a wrong wind. So I'm like, I need to be out there just to see what's going on. But I can't go in, like, to where I know the deer are. So I pulled way out, and I was just sitting there in the middle of a field with a spotter, just watching and looking. And my eye was in the glass. Like, I was just looking through the glass, watching all these deer down literally 10 yards in front of my tree stand. And I hear something next to me, and I'm like I just look over, and there was a buck 40 yards, like, coming at me. And so on a day where I thought I wasn't hunting, I did have my bow, obviously. But on a day I thought I wasn't hunting, all of a sudden there's a buck coming at me at 40 yards. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to do it. Like, I don't know why he's out here. I don't know why he's come in the middle of this wide open field, but he's about to walk right in front of me. And turns out it ended up being a little buck that I didn't want to shoot, but this deer comes 20 yards broadside and walks right in front of me. And so I have my bow up, and I'm like ready. And I'm like, dude, on a day I thought I wasn't hunting, and trust me, I was looking through my glass at, like, my shooters down in the field. But I had a deer at 20 yards walk right in front of me. And what I learned in that moment was that could have easily just as been a 180-inch deer. Like, that could have been, sure, it was a 110-inch, 6-point, but that could have been a 180-inch deer that just happened to walk out here. And so that's what I encourage people to do, is, like, don't go in, like, to where the deer are and to where you're going to be hunting, but pull way out. I mean, on 40 acres, you can still get, way out and just sit and watch. Or what oh my gosh, Mark Drury, what Mark Drury recommends is, having your A+ tree stands and then having, like, B- tree stands, to where, like, again, this is on the back side of the property. Deer don't really come over here. There's no food, but I can hunt it with a different wind. So if tree stand A+, I need a north wind. On B-, this tree stand that's, never really going to turn into anything good, I can hunt it with a south wind. Well, then if you have a wrong wind, at least you still have somewhere to go and sit. to where you might see, a couple does, you might see a coyote, you might see some other things, and maybe even set it up in a way where you can see A plus, or at least that area where you can see the deer over there. That way, again, you're still patterning and you're still pattering. Good Lord. You're still putting a pattern on those
There
deer
you go.
without going in there and messing up the deer themselves. So that's what the juries recommend doing, is just having a couple of tree stands set up, even on a small piece of ground, like you're mentioning. Again, they might not ever turn into anything, but you never know, man. If you have a right wind, especially if it's the rut, especially if you're being vocal, you might pull a deer over there, and if you've got the right wind, you're not going to hurt anything. So that's what I would recommend doing.
Yeah, I really like that. I've never set up or even heard that before, but that's really good stuff. And I'm even thinking right now places on my 40 acres that I could put up spots, and it'd be perfect just to get out there, see some stuff. Even learn more about your property. Maybe put it in a place that you don't. With the wind, it's perfect, or with a bad wind, it's perfect. You're not going to bump deer, but you're going to maybe learn more about your spot, learn more about deer movement. So I think that's perfect.
Yeah. My one of the places I have is literally 5 acres, and my in-laws' house sits in the middle of the 5 acres. So no matter where you're at, you're like 300 yards from their house. And so there's been times where, and on 5 acres, especially with a house right in the middle, there's only 2 places I can even set up. Like period, especially since the road is right there. There's only 2 places I can set up, period. So there's been times I've literally went out and in street clothes and just sat on their back deck. But I can see the food plot, I can see the watering hole, I can see my tree stand, and I can just watch, where are those deer coming from, where are they going. So I'm not boogering those deer up, but I can still learn just as much about those deer by literally sitting on my in-laws' back deck, drinking coffee with a pair of binoculars. And you still get that fix. Like, at that point, you're not hunting at all. Like, I don't even have my bow because I don't want to start shooting at deer from the back deck, because then you're just associating them danger with human. So I'm not even hunting, but I'm still out there trying to just learn, where are the deer coming from? Where are they going? Where are they jumping the fence at? Where are they jumping the fence to come on? Where are they jumping the fence to leave? How long are they eating? What time are they coming in? Again, I'm just learning everything I can about those deer without going in and messing them up.
Yeah, that's important. I'm just thinking back to 2 years ago, the first year I went in, it was like, just had no idea, didn't think about all the things that I think about now. And it's such a challenge, so for people that are first starting off, and even me, I'm still learning, like I said, but try to understand their movement. That's the most important thing. Set up trail cams, get out there, like you said, and just, if you're not in a good spot or the wind's not right, just try to learn as much as you can. I think that's the most important thing. And I'm still learning all about that. So
I would also say, for a new hunter, which again, you can start learning this from 400 yards away, but start learning the mannerisms of deer, how they're acting. Are they acting weary, or are they sticking their head down and eating for 20 minutes at a time without ever looking up? But start looking at how deer respond, like when a coyote runs in. What happens when a coyote runs through there? What happens to those deer? What happens when a buck comes between a mom and her fawns? Like, how do deer respond to those types of things? Start listening to deer. Start, during the rut, how are they being vocal? How are they listen to how it sounds when deer actually fight? Listen to those types of things and just watch. And again, that's something you can learn from 400 yards away without going in and boogering up and messing up the herd and messing up the deer, and without educating those deer. You can start learning all of those things without having to go in and mess up the deer. Now, you did find success. You shot your first buck in Oklahoma. How was that?
I don't know if I've ever had the adrenaline rush like that. It's pretty average deer, but man, it got me excited, and it's a treasure in my eyes. but yeah, that was a
That's
cool
awesome, dude.
experience. So I never thought I'd shoot my first deer in Oklahoma. Um, I've been hunting in Nebraska. Everything changes so quickly. Sometimes, you got the opportunity to come down here and into Arkansas, and then met Parker Rowland, one of our catchers. He grew up in just north of Tulsa, and had some land up there, and gave me the opportunity. We became really good friends, and asked if I want to
Wait a
go.
second. How far north of Tulsa?
I want to say, is it it's by Osage.
Dude, I hunt right there.
Really?
It's like one of my favorite places in the world to go hunt.
Yeah, it's his property is pretty sweet. He's got the setup, so that is a beautiful country with we had hills and little river systems
Yes.
running through there. It's totally
Yeah.
different than what I experienced in Nebraska on my property. So that was really just a cool experience.
Oklahoma is one of my favorite places to hunt just because it offers so much different terrain. I mean, you can be in the Kiamichi Mountains, they're close to where you're at, and hunt and, big timber. You can be like in that area in the Osage County area and be hunting, wide open rolling hills. And then, you go out to the Panhandle, you're hunting desert almost. I mean, you can just hunt so much different terrain. And really, dude, I think there's a lot of big deer come out of Oklahoma. And I think it's been a sleeper state for a long time, but it's starting to get some press as being a good place to go deer hunting. And man, I love hunting in Oklahoma for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it was just a great experience overall, especially just being able to connect with some of my teammates. Hunter Holland, a pitcher, was there too. It's a cool experience that we shared together, and I when you think of big bucks, I don't know. I mean, you think of Iowa, you think of Missouri, but a lot of Parker's friends have put down monster deer down there, and we always talk. Me and Parker have been talking, and we're like, hey, in the future, whatever, when things settle down, whatever, we should trade hunts and bounce state to state and come up to Nebraska if that's where I'm at or wherever I'm at, and just go hunting together. So it's cool to make those
Yeah.
you know those friendships, and hopefully we stay in contact and do that. So um, yeah.
I actually shot a deer there this year. I was hunting in Pawhuska, and I shot a deer there this year, and that was a really cool experience because my son's 4. And so this was the first year where I'm like, all right, you're good. Like, let's start getting you out in the blind. So we had been going out a lot during early season and when it was warm and hunting together. And we had seen some deer, we had seen some coyotes, we'd seen some bobcats. We'd had a lot of fun. But we just didn't, find any success, mainly because when things would get good, I would leave them at home. Because I'm like, okay, you're not good enough yet to like go out on prime days with me. So when things would get good, I'd be like, hey, I'm going out hunting. And he'd be like, I want to go. And I'm like, not today, bud. But anyways, there in Pawhuska, my wife and kids were actually there with me. They were just in the cabin, hanging out when I would go out hunting. And it was bitterly cold, or I would have my boy out there. But and so I actually got to, when I called the outfitter and said, hey, dude, I just shot a deer. I was like, could you do me a favor, though? Could you swing by the cabin and pick up my boy before you come out here? And he was like, I'd love to, man. And so my son got to come out there with me on the retrieval, and I saw him drop, like I knew where he was, but I still played it out with my son. I'm like, all right, dude, where's my arrow? We got to find my arrow first. And, we found my arrow, and I could literally see the deer from where we're at. But I'm like, all right, we got to find the arrow. And we find the arrow. He's like, dude, I found it. There's blood on it. Dad, you got him. And I'm like, all right, well, we got to find blood. We got to walk to him, And so my son got to track him. Like, we got to do the whole deal together. And so that was just really fun to get to have that with my son. But it was also it was a crazy fun experience just getting my son out there, like just doing that with my boy. He said a lot of funny stuff, and I just did a lot of funny stuff. But I do want to tell a quick story. So the outfitter gets out there, and we find the deer and everything. We take all the pictures, and he said, dude, your son's a riot. I'm like, oh no, what'd he do? And he's like, we were on our way out here, and we see mud. And he's like, here's a 4-year-old in the back seat. He's like, go through the mud. Yeah, let's go through the mud. So we went through the mud, and we got stuck. And he said, your son looked at me, shook his head, and said, we shouldn't have went through the mud. I'm like, yeah.
That's
I'm
awesome.
like, yeah, that's my boy.
That's your
him.
boy.
He'll do that. So how'd that hunt play out? Like, tell me the story.
Yeah, so it was a morning hunt, kind of almost I'd say right before maybe pre-rut, and we headed out early in the morning, got into kind of this area that was up on a ridge, and then there was a river system that U'd kind of around the stand. Basically, it was decent wind, I would say. We had a northwest wind, and there were two paths crossing that you could tell, and there was a scrape right down to my left, which that point, the wind was not perfect for that scrape. But anyway, we had two cross passing, and got in there. Early on, I saw two bucks chasing does, small spike, and then I actually had a really nice 8 point. Try to grunt him in, and he got within 20, but that wind wasn't right, and he ended up spooking and ran off. Couldn't get him in, so I was actually at full draw waiting for him to turn at 20, which was that was a tough one to swallow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a pretty nice buck, and so then an hour or so goes by. Here's some movement behind me. Deer comes running in, kind of grabbed my bow. He had a doe had gone maybe 5 minutes before through that area, and he was on the trail of her, so he was running in hard. Had kind of a split decision, or a quick decision. Had my bow ready just because I heard him running. I got him to stop and let it fly. It was a split decision I had to make, and made a perfect shot. I think double lunged him, and I saw him fall down about 70 yards away, I'd say. Pretty cool experience, and then obviously called
That is
Parker,
cool.
called my dad. So it was a cool experience.
That is cool, man. And that's something like, as you start hunting, you start learning more about how do I need to practice. Because as a new hunter who's never bow hunted, like I remember like when I was getting my wife into it, and I'm like, all right, like we would start getting ready for season. I'm like, all right, I want you to draw back, and then I want you to wait. Like, just draw back and wait until I say now. And she's like, why? And I'm like, well, the deer's walking behind a tree. You got to wait till he clears the tree before you can shoot. So I'm going to tell you when. And she's like, this is the stupidest thing ever. And I'm like, just trust me, please. But like, that's the type of thing, like as a new hunter, you start learning those things. Like you start learning, man, I didn't know I was going to have to wait at full draw for 2 minutes. Like I didn't know that I was going to get my bow back and then, wait 90 seconds before I have to shoot. And I've never practiced that before. So now all this year you have time to practice. Like, all right, I have to come to full draw and I have to wait for him and then I have to make a shot. And so as a new hunter, I would say take those learning experiences that you find in the woods and then apply those to how you practice. Apply those things to different situations. And, there's like, I've told people all the time, like practice coming to full draw and then you have to turn, 45 degrees and make a shot over there because the deer moved before you could shoot. And that's just something that you never think about as a new hunter who's never found yourself in the woods. You just draw back and shoot at a target at 20 yards and try to hit the dot. But then as you start learning, all of these experiences start adding up and you can try these different scenarios out. So, I tell people, like, if you're hunting from a tree stand, you need to practice elevation. If you're hunting from a tree stand, you need to practice having your back against the tree and then turning around the tree to shoot. You got to practice all those things because you never know when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen. So practice them all. What kind of, as an athlete, I like talking to athletes who begin bow hunting. As an athlete, do you think that gave you the edge on handling emotions as it was taking place?
Yeah, I would say so. As an athlete, you get put in some high leverage situations, especially with baseball. Walking up to the plate, maybe, game's on the line, you got to get a hit. Kind of that adrenaline rush, that nervousness. Yeah, I mean, I'd say it definitely helps you out mentally. And another thing I think, I can always relate just how athletics and bow hunting have, they're very similar. Um, with athletics, especially baseball, it's a game of failure. You're gonna fail 7 out of 10 times at the plate, and you're gonna be a really really good hitter. So it's kind of one of those things where I've always learned from failure. When you fail, it's how it happens, and I kind of translate that to kind of all aspects of my life, especially bow hunting, just because you're gonna fail and you're gonna have challenges and you're gonna learn new things, and so I'd say being an athlete definitely helps in those the crunch time situations.
So what was the biggest single takeaway? If you could tell the new hunter, listen, this was my biggest lesson, and I just want to go ahead and share it with you now. What would be that biggest lesson that you learned that you want to share with new hunters just getting started?
Oh, I'd say, as cliche as it sounds, enjoy the process. Like, you don't have it figured out, and I don't know if you ever will, but enjoy that process of learning. Enjoy that process of getting out. Enjoy, watching deer, learning how they work. Just take pride in it, and you do that, and you'll have some cool experiences, and just don't take it for granted. It's good. You have the ability to put meat on the table and all that, and just don't take it for granted. I think that's the most important thing.
That's awesome, man. I'm very picky about the nonprofits that I will support. I look into them a lot. I don't just jump in and support anybody that says we're a nonprofit. I met a friend of mine. His name is Jim Mesh, and he runs a memorial fund, a scholarship in his brother's name, the John V. Mesh Memorial Scholarship. And what they do, they have a passion for getting kids involved in outdoors. So they host these events around the country to get kids introduced to hunting, but also to raise money for their scholarship fund, which is the John V. Mesh Scholarship. And what that is that's a scholarship that if any student is going into a field of conservation study, they can apply for this scholarship. And it's a substantial scholarship. That's another thing. If they say we're a nonprofit and we do all this and then they give $1,000 scholarship, then you're like, well, where does the rest of the money go? But they give a very substantial scholarship to a student every year looking to go into a conservation field of study. So guys, maybe you are a student and you're studying some field of conservation. I would encourage you to apply for the John V. Mesh Memorial Scholarship. But also, I would encourage you, everybody, to support this nonprofit scholarship fund, whether it's through a one-time donation, a monthly donation, or attending one of their events, or buying one of the things they have on auction at these events. Support a company that's supporting our rights as hunters by furthering our conservation efforts by supporting students who are going into a conservation field of study. Guys, go check out the John V. Mesh Memorial Scholarship at johnvmesh.org. Well, Jared, thank you so much for coming on, man. I look forward to not only watching you get back to Omaha, but I look forward to also watching you continue in this journey, watching you continue to learn, watching you continue to put down bigger and better deer, and just growing as a bow hunter. But guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys have a fantastic